Okay, let's unpack this incredible life story. When we talk about Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, we often hear the titles.
Hmm.
Principal architect of the Indian Constitution, the country's first law minister, a world-class scholar. We give him all the accolades that his intellect absolutely earned.
And that's necessary, of course,
Yeah.
but those titles by themselves are really just the surface level of the man, aren't they?
They are.
The mission of this deep dive is to go beyond those bureaucratic labels and really try to understand the intense life struggles,
The daily struggle.
the fundamental daily denial of basic human dignity that forged him into Baba Saheb, the revolutionary leader for millions of oppressed people. His intellectual journey, his pursuit of the world's highest degrees, it wasn't an escape from his circumstances.
Yeah.
It was an act of war against them.
That distinction war, not escape, that's absolutely crucial. He was born into the fight.
He was.
Born on April 14th, 1891, the 14th child of Ramji Sukhpal and Bhimabai, and they belong to the Mahar community, officially designated as untouchables.
Right. A crippling social handicap from birth.
But his father was a non-commissioned officer in the British Indian Army, and he stressed this one powerful, almost revolutionary idea in their home.
What was that?
Education is the only way out.
And that military background his father had, it gave the family a kind of structure and discipline that was, well, it's rare in their community. And this structure gave Ambedkar the mental tools he needed to succeed.
But the system was constantly trying to negate those efforts, wasn't it?
Constantly. To understand the psychological damage, you really have to start right at the beginning, in primary school.
Absolutely. It just sets the tone for the profound absurdity of the entire caste system.
It really does.
We're talking about a small boy who had to sit on a separate burlap mat in the corner of the classroom, physically segregated from his peers.
And he couldn't even leave the mat there overnight. He had to roll it up and take it home with him every single day.
Why?
Because even the school peon refused to touch it, fearing pollution.
Think about what that daily ritual communicates to a 7-year-old.
You are physically present, you're learning the same lessons, but you are marked as inherently different, inherently polluting.
But it was the water rule that defined his physical suffering.
Yes, the sources detail that crushing phrase, no peon, no water.
Can you just elaborate on the mechanism of that denial? It's so specific.
It was a very specific form of exclusion. He was absolutely forbidden from touching the communal water pot
Or even the tap.
or the tap used by the other students.
Yeah.
If he was thirsty, he had to wait, sometimes for hours, for the school peon to be available.
And the peon would then, what, pour it for him?
Yes, the peon would stand, open the tap, and pour the water from a height into Ambedkar's cupped hands.
So there was no physical contact.
Zero physical contact,
Yeah.
not between the boy and the water source or the boy and the peon.
Just imagine sitting in that classroom on a hot day, completely parched, trying to focus on geography or math. But your physical well-being is entirely dependent on the presence and willingness of a single low-level employee.
And if the peon was absent or just busy,
The student simply went thirsty all day.
it wasn't abstract social exclusion. It was a physical, visceral, dehumanizing denial of necessity. And this daily reality, it immediately established a core truth for young Ambedkar,
Which was?
that the world he lived in was fundamentally unfair and designed to inflict pain based on birth, not on conduct.
That senselessness is what drove his intellectual curiosity, right? His early questioning of why society was structured this way. The sources show that Ambedkar, being from this disciplined and, relatively well-off family unit thanks to his father's military career, he truly could not grasp the logic behind it.
No, he couldn't. He and his siblings were clean, they were often better dressed than their peers, and well-behaved. He just kept asking, where is the logic in this baffling discrimination?
That's the psychological cornerstone of his resistance, isn't it? When he questioned his elder sister, she could only offer the most ancient and depressing justification.
It has always been this way.
Exactly. But Ambedkar had the clarity, even as a child, to realize that tradition and history are not the same as justification or truth.
Yes. He understood intuitively that if a rule is stupid and cruel, it can be changed.
And it must be changed.
It must be.
That early intellectual rejection of destiny is what makes his story so powerful. He didn't internalize the shame.
No, he externalized the absurdity. And the incident that truly solidified this internal conviction, the transformation from a personal scar to a political conviction, was the bullet car tragedy.
This is a devastating moment, and it's important we really paint the picture here.
It is. Ambedkar and his brother were traveling to meet their father in a place called Gurgaon during a school break. And they were neat, polished, and carried themselves with dignity.
So they arrive at the railway station, and the station master, a man who had no immediate knowledge of their background, he sees these two well-dressed boys waiting patiently.
Right. And initially, he approaches them with sympathy. He assumes they're high-caste students waiting for their guardian, and he offers to help them arrange transport.
And then comes a sudden shift.
When Phim tells him they are Mahars, the sources describe the station master's face changing instantly.
Wow.
The kindness just vanished. It was replaced by a kind of shock and repulsion that led to immediate withdrawal. The station master just left them there, alone.
So they then tried to hire a bullock cart to travel the last few miles to Gorgan.
But word spread quickly among the cart drivers.
And the refusal was total.
Every single cartman declined to drive them, simply because they were untouchables. This wasn't a matter of money at first.
It was religious fear and social prejudice.
Completely.
So how did they eventually secure transport?
They managed to convince one driver, but only by offering a massive sum double the normal fare.
Okay, so money did talk in the end.
It did, but even with that huge financial incentive, the terms are utterly humiliating.
What were they?
The boys had to drive the cart themselves. Yes, and the cartman would walk separately alongside the cart, terrified that he would be polluted by their proximity even after taking their money.
That is just a staggering image. This man agreed to walk beside his own cart for hours for twice the price, just so he could afford the ritual purification of his vehicle and himself later.
It shows you that economic logic completely collapsed under the weight of religious prejudice.
And it was during that long, slow, contemplative journey that the core truth crystallized for the young Ambedkar.
How can clean, neatly dressed, educated children pollute everything they touch? This incident cemented his belief that the Hindu caste system, specifically untouchability, was stupid, cruel, and unreasonable. He realized the system didn't just injure him, it was senseless and irrational.
And therefore it must be vulnerable to reason.
Exactly. That external impression, though, existed alongside this incredible internal resolve, a commitment to self-improvement.
The sources mention his deep sadness after his mother, Bhimabai, died. He missed her greatly, and this grief led to a sort of minor internal crisis.
Yeah, the small, powerful anecdote of him attempting to run away. He was so unhappy and missed his mother so much that he decided he wanted to escape to Bombay.
And to fund the trip, he tried to steal a small coin from his aunt's purse.
But the moment he held the coin, this shame hit him immediately.
An instant moral reckoning.
It was. He put the coin back, felt intense remorse, and that pivotal experience cemented a vow within him.
What was the vow?
He would study hard and become independent. He would earn his freedom, not steal a chance at it. The commitment to ethical conduct and effort, it really starts right here.
And thankfully, he had small pockets of support.
We have to mention Krishnaji Keshav Ambedkar, his high caste teacher.
Right.
This teacher recognized his exceptional ability, he praised his work, and he performed this extraordinary gesture of social defiance.
He changed his surname.
He changed the boy's surname from his native village name, which was Ambedkar, to his own Ambedkar. That act of simple recognition of merit over birth gave the young boy a name that would one day define a nation.
That focus on merit paid dividends almost immediately. Ambedkar was the first in his Mahar community to pass the matriculation exam. He was 17.
And he married Ramabai that same year. But moving past secondary education required resources the family just didn't have.
Right. His father, Ramji Sakpal, was retired on a small army pension. It really looked like his educational journey might stall right there.
This is where serendipity, mixed with the reputation of his intelligence, intervened. The Maharaja of Baroda, Sayajirao Gaikwad III, granted him a monthly scholarship.
And that allowed him to earn his BA and, critically, move the family to Bombay to pursue the best possible education at Elphinstone High School and then college.
The sources paint a picture of just relentless dedication required to survive in Bombay and pursue that education. This wasn't some quiet boarding school experience.
No, the entire family lived in a single, small, crowded room in a noisy, poor locality.
And his dedication was born of pure necessity and desperation. He understood that time was his most valuable and often his only resource.
So he developed this brutal study schedule.
He would sleep, exhausted, immediately after school, and then his father would wake him at 2 a.m. when the streets were quiet,
giving him a few precious hours of uninterrupted peace to do his homework and study.
It just speaks volumes about the sacrifice required. But even this supreme effort couldn't shield him from the humiliation.
No, even in a modern, famous city high school like Elphinstone, the caste barrier persisted.
It did, and often in the most public and damaging ways. We have that well-documented story of the classroom where the teacher called him up to the blackboard to solve a math problem.
And the response from his classmates was immediate and hostile.
Yes. All the other boys immediately stood up in protest. They showed their extreme displeasure, not because he was bad at math.
But because their lunchboxes were stored right behind the blackboard.
Exactly. They feared that Ambedkar's physical presence, his shadow, his breath, his touch, would pollute their food. This is physical, hateful prejudice asserting itself directly into the academic space.
And there was the academic denial as well. He was denied the study of Sanskrit.
The language of the gods and therefore off-limits to untouchables. He was forced to study Persian instead.
And that rejection became a powerful intellectual motivator for him.
Oh, absolutely. He knew that to truly dismantle the religious authority of the caste system, he had to understand its source code. He found a way to secretly master Sanskrit later in life. He refused to accept that the language of intellectual inquiry could be forbidden to him.
This educational journey reaches its peak in 1913. The Maharaja of Baroda selects him for further studies abroad, sending him to the United States, to Columbia University in New York.
And this, we realize, was the first time in his entire life he was judged purely on merit.
This was the golden period, the moment he tasted true social freedom.
He often reflected later on how profound that experience was. In New York, he could study alongside anyone, live in any dormitory, use any public service without question. For the first time, the intellectual playing field was level.
He responded to this freedom by absolutely devouring knowledge.
He studied economics and sociology, deeply influenced by the pragmatic democratic philosophy of Professor John Dewey. His work ethic, already intense, became legendary.
He was studying 18 to 20 hours a day.
Driven by the knowledge that this time was financed by a sponsor, and it was his only shot. He achieved his MA and completed his PhD thesis in just 2 years.
Incredible.
He then moves to London to study law at Gray's Inn and economics at the London School of Economics, LSE.
And he was often perilously close to poverty, wasn't he?
Very close. He had to stretch his funds to the absolute limit. Sources confirm he would subsist almost entirely on cheap bread and tea just to save enough money to buy the books he needed for his research.
He prioritized the intellectual tools over physical comfort.
Always. But his scholarship expired before he could finish his LSE doctorate, forcing him back to India in 1917, bound by an agreement to serve Baroda state.
So he returns, armed with degrees that should have made him untouchable in the professional sense, ready to take a high-ranking job as military secretary.
And here we hit the devastating realization that shattered the illusion of achievement.
He was a world-class scholar, a double doctorate.
Yet still just a Mahar. The degrees meant nothing against the label of his caste.
The sources detailed the shocking treatment in the Baroda state office. Colleagues, even the low-ranking peon whose job it was to deliver files, refused to touch him.
They wouldn't even hand him anything directly.
Yeah.
They would literally throw the files onto his desk from a distance.
Wow.
No one offered him water. His intellectual authority was absolute, yet his physical presence was treated as toxic waste. It was a daily, painful demonstration that his success was meaningless to those dedicated to maintaining the caste hierarchy.
And outside the office, the humiliation was compounded by the housing crisis.
No hotel, no landlord, no dharamsala would rent him a room. He tried desperately, day after day.
Finally, in desperation, he managed to secure a room in a Parsi guest house by concealing his caste. He had to lie about his identity.
And he lived in constant fear of discovery, miserable and isolated, still hoping to find permanent accommodation so he could commit to his new role.
But the secret was exposed.
Yes. One morning, a group of angry Parsis members of the community that owned the guest house armed with sticks cornered him, accused him of pollution, and physically threatened him.
And they forced him out late that night.
He was left completely alone, wandering the streets of Baroda with his luggage, forced to sit under a tree in a public garden all night.
He wrote later that he was left feeling miserable and defeated.
After just 12 days, he abandoned the high-ranking job. This incident was the final, brutal lesson.
What was the lesson?
Personal, academic success was utterly insufficient against a system fortified by religious prejudice. He needed to fight for his entire community, not just for himself.
And it seems his next few professional failures, like the investment business, which customers fled when they learned his caste, that was the final economic nail in the coffin that forced his political hand.
Yes, The failure of his investment firm due to prejudice was the final turning point. He realized he could not save himself individually, regardless of his merit. His focus shifted entirely from private ambition to public agitation.
So, after that devastating personal setback, he landed a lecturing position at Sydenham College in Bombay in 1918, and he thrived there as a brilliant and popular teacher.
He did. But the focus now was explicitly political. He knew he needed to arm his community.
And he understood that representation and voice were the first weapons.
Exactly. So he started the Marathi newspaper, Muknayak, which means leader of the dumb.
And the goal was to publicize the suffering of the depressed classes.
To give a voice to the voiceless, to show that their oppression was systemic, not just a series of isolated incidents.
And he also understood the value of organization, which brings us to 1924 and the founding of the Bahishkrit Hikarini Sabha.
This organization was built on a foundational philosophy that became the blueprint for the entire movement.
Educate, organize, and agitate.
That's it. This was pragmatic action, focused on setting up hostels, schools, and free libraries. Education was the key to self-respect, organization was the key to power, and agitation was the key to change.
His first major acts of defiance were very direct and symbolic. Let's talk about the Mahad Satyagraha in 1927.
Right. The setting was a public water source, the chowder tank in Mahad. Legally, it was open to everyone.
Legally.
But centuries of tradition enforced by violence meant untouchables were forbidden from using it.
So Ambedkar led thousands of people to the tank.
It was a clear, symbolic declaration of their right to public space and dignity.
He marched down, drank the water, and declared it a symbolic act of war against inequality. But the response from the upper castes was swift, violent, and, well, truly grotesque.
After assaulting the participants, the upper caste communities purified the public tank
Oh,
by pouring cow dung and cow urine into it,
wow.
reinforcing the idea that the touch of the oppressed was toxic pollution. This visceral response proved Ambedkar's point.
That the system wasn't interested in coexisting.
No, it was interested in maintaining purity at all costs, even if it meant denying water to fellow human beings.
That same year, he performed another incredibly powerful symbolic act.
Burning the Manusmriti.
The ancient text that codified the Varna system and institutionalized the oppression of Dalits and women.
Yes, burning it was a declaration that his people were cutting ties with the foundational religious law that justified their exploitation. It was a rejection of the spiritual basis of their slavery.
The political struggle intensified in the 1930s, culminating in that famous, profound clash with Mahatma Gandhi during the Roundtable Conferences in London.
The stakes were immense. Representation for the oppressed classes in the new structure of independent India.
And Ambedkar's demand was sharp and highly strategic.
It was separate electorates for the depressed classes.
He viewed them as a distinct political entity, entirely separate from Hindus,
who in his view were their oppressors. He argued that only separate electorates would guarantee that their representatives were truly accountable to the oppressed and not beholden to the dominant caste majority.
Wait, the sources show Ambedkar had the political high ground at the Roundtable Conference. So why did he allow Gandhi's fast, immoral, emotional weapon to override his logical, strategic demand?
That's where the high stakes become just agonizing. Gandhi opposed separate electorates fiercely.
Right. He viewed the oppressed classes as Harijans, children of God.
And he insisted they were essential for Hindu unity, arguing separation would permanently divide the nation. So Gandhi announced a fast unto death.
He declared he would die before accepting the separate electorates.
The pressure on Ambedkar must have been unbearable. If Gandhi died, Ambedkar would be blamed by the entire nation for dividing the Hindus and causing the death of the father of the nation.
It was an impossible choice.
It was a moral, political blackmail. He had to either hold firm and potentially face responsibility for widespread violence in Gandhi's death, or save Gandhi and sacrifice the crucial political safeguard he had fought for.
And he reluctantly agreed to the Pune Pact in 1932.
He did.
What was the compromise?
He gave up the separate electorates, but secured a guaranteed number of reserved seats reservation within the general Hindu electorate. It was a significant increase in the number of seats.
And that system is still in place today.
For better or worse, yes. Ambedkar viewed it as a necessary evil to save Gandhi's life and prevent chaos. But he always maintained that the separate electorate was the superior method for genuine representation.
Despite these political compromises, his intellectual command made him indispensable. After independence, he was brought in as the first law minister and, critically, the chairman of the drafting committee. He quite literally drafted the destiny of India.
His work here was indispensable, and not just for Dalits. He embedded key legal weapons into the Constitution,
Most famously, Article 17.
which outlawed untouchability and made its practice a punishable offense. This provided legal armor to millions.
And he was a fierce advocate for gender justice, too.
Let's talk about the Hindu Code Bill. Why was it so radical? It was revolutionary for its time in the late 40s and early 50s. Ambedkar realized that social oppression wasn't just caste-based, it was also patriarchal,
So the Hindu Code Bill aimed to modernize Hindu personal law,
granting women rights to divorce, property inheritance, and maintenance.
which was bitterly opposed by conservative forces.
Absolutely. The opposition was so fierce that the bill was eventually dropped. But Ambedkar's willingness to push for comprehensive social reform for women's rights alongside caste rights showed his commitment to transforming society from the ground up.
He saw all oppression as connected.
He did.
So by 1935, he had armed his people with political tools and was pushing for legislative reform. But he made that historic vow at the Yeola Conference.
I was born a Hindu, but I will not die a Hindu.
Why was political victory still insufficient?
This is the spiritual turning point. He realized that law changes external behavior, but it doesn't change the internal religious justification for hatred.
The heart of the nation remained corrupted.
Corrupted by religious texts endorsing caste. He realized that giving his people reserved seats didn't remove the psychological scar of being told they were inherently impure.
True liberation, he concluded, required a complete overhaul. A new metaphysical self-image rooted in worth, choice, and freedom, not guilt or imposed destiny.
The law was the armor, but the religion had to be the soul. What's fascinating here is the 21-year gap between the vow in 1935 and the mass conversion in 1956.
It wasn't an emotional, spontaneous flight from one faith to another.
Not at all. It was a deeply rigorous intellectual process. Ambedkar approached religious conversion as a philosopher and a sociologist searching for the perfect ethical framework for social justice.
It wasn't just guessing. His search was sharp and highly strategic. We have to detail his criteria. What did he demand from a new religion?
He had 4 essential criteria. First, it must be founded on liberty, equality, and fraternity.
Okay.
Second, it must be compatible with modern science and rationality, rejecting supernatural miracles and blind faith. It must reject caste completely. And fourth, crucially, it needed to be an indigenous, non-alienating faith that would not risk the denationalization of his people.
Let's detail his analysis of the alternatives then. Why were other major religions rejected, even if they preached equality?
Starting with Christianity and Islam. Both preach universal brotherhood, which met one criteria. He had major concerns. First, the theological dogmas, Jesus as the Son of God, Prophet Muhammad as the final messenger, required belief in a supernatural order and submission to a divine authority.
Which clashed fundamentally with his commitment to rationality and critical thinking.
Exactly. He believed that intellectual freedom was paramount. Submission to a savior, whether divine or prophetic, was just replacing one form of submission cast with another theological dogma.
And second, there was the political fallout, the denationalization risk.
Right. He saw the integration of oppressed classes as vital for modern India. Adopting faiths perceived as foreign, even if they offered spiritual equality, risked isolating them politically, potentially viewing them as fifth columnists.
Which would only perpetuate their marginalization.
And he also observed that in India, even these egalitarian faiths hadn't been immune to the caste virus. Caste distinctions had crept into Muslim and Christian communities over centuries.
Proving that conversion alone wasn't a silver bullet.
Then there was Sikhism. He considered it seriously because it was indigenous to India and philosophically protested the caste system, especially through its emphasis on service and community kitchens.
But ultimately rejected it. Why?
Again, lingering caste-based distinctions within the Sikh community itself complicated its adoption. He saw that while the philosophy was egalitarian, the practice in certain regions still segregated communities based on their original caste status.
And Hinduism, of course, was ruled out fundamentally because its core structure, the Varna system, was religiously exploitative.
Yes, its foundational texts codified inequality, and its avatars claimed to be God, demanding submission to the divine. Ambedkar's entire life was about claiming human agency, so a religion built on surrender was an impossibility.
So what was it about the Buddha that drew this intensely rational man? He details this so clearly in his writings, contrasting the founders of the major faiths.
The crucial distinction lay in the claim of the founder. If you look at Jesus, he claimed to be the Son of God, Muhammad the messenger of God, Hindu avatars God incarnate,
They're all Mokshadeva.
saviors who deliver salvation.
Yeah.
Exactly.
The Buddha, however, claimed only to be a man.
A moral teacher, a Margadeta, a pathfinder. He never claimed supernatural power or demanded submission.
This resonated profoundly with Ambedkar's scientific and rational mind.
The Buddha only presented a path, the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path, for followers to investigate and follow through self-effort. It's known as ihipasiko.
Come and see for yourself.
It was an invitation to reason, not a command to believe.
This matched his criteria perfectly. Buddhism was rooted in prajna, which is wisdom or understanding, and karuna, which is compassion.
Demanding reason over miracles or blind faith, it was compatible with the scientific and ethical demands of modern life.
And critically for his social mission, Buddhism offered absolute samatha, or equality, from its inception.
The Buddha rejected caste entirely. His Sangha, the monastic community, welcomed kings, Brahmins, and scavengers equally. It was a functioning model of a casteless society, proving that equality was attainable.
Furthermore, he noted that Buddhism was the only major religion that promoted true gender equality, allowing women to become bhikkhunis, or nuns, and achieve enlightenment.
This was a critical factor for a man who had fought so fiercely for women's rights in the Hindu Code Bill.
He chose a religion that started not with a metaphysical claim about an omnipotent God,
but with the simple observation that life contains suffering, and that suffering can be overcome through human action and wisdom. It was purely an ethical, social, and rational choice.
Ambedkar spent 21 years searching for the perfect vessel, but he knew that simply adopting ancient traditional Buddhism wasn't enough.
No, it had to be customized, or perhaps purified, to speak directly to the conditions of 20th century social injustice and the needs of a formerly oppressed community.
So he forged what he called Navayana, the new vehicle.
This was not a passive retreat into quiet meditation, but an aggressive social and philosophical transformation. He took the essence of the Buddha's teachings and sharpened them for the modern world.
How exactly did Navayana differ from the traditional forms of Buddhism, like Theravada or Mahayana, which often emphasize monastic life and cycles of rebirth?
Ambedkar rigorously stripped away what he saw as later unnecessary metaphysical baggage.
Things added over century.
Elements often added by scholastic or even Brahminical influences. This included the abstract concept of rebirth, excessive monastic renunciation, and, most crucially, deterministic karma.
Let's spend a moment on the rejection of deterministic karma, because this is the core psychological revolution. Why was it so vital to reject the idea that suffering is solely due to past sins?
Well, if one believes that their current suffering, their poverty, their indignity, their low status, is payment for sins committed in past life, it achieves two deeply destructive things. First, it provides a moral justification for the oppressor, who can claim they are merely administering cosmic justice.
And second,
It encourages fatalism and resignation in the oppressed. Why fight if your suffering is destiny?
Navayana flips this completely on its head.
It does. It shifts the blame for current suffering away from the victim's supposed past life and places it squarely on the present social order and the perpetrators of caste.
Precisely. His Buddhism was rooted in the idea that present suffering is caused by present injustice and must be fought actively through collective action, wisdom, and morality.
The goal of this religion was not personal salvation achieved by escaping the world, but collective transformation.
His manifesto for this new path was his final text, The Buddha and His Dhamma.
That book recast the Buddha. He's no longer presented as a supernatural savior meditating under a tree,
But as a social philosopher,
an ethical rebel, and a practical guide. The goal of Navayana was achieving nirvana not as an abstract heavenly reward, but as a kingdom of righteousness right here on earth, anchored in liberty, equality, and fraternity. It's an engaged Buddhism focused on justice and society.
this philosophical preparation culminated in one of the most extraordinary spiritual and political acts of the 20th century, the mass conversion on October 14th, 1956.
The scene itself was monumental, and the choice of location was strategic. Nagpur in Maharashtra, chosen for its historical ties to ancient Buddhist culture, sometimes referred to as Nagaloka,
Linking the modern conversion to a forgotten indigenous legacy.
fulfilling his criteria of finding an indigenous path.
Yes.
Ambedkar, frail and ill, he would die less than 2 months later, stood before more than 500,000 followers.
And they were all dressed in white, symbolizing purity and rebirth.
Together, they formally embraced the Triratna, the Buddha, the Dharma, the Sangha.
But the crucial element, the constitution of this new moral community, was the 22 vows that Ambedkar composed and administered. These weren't just standard Buddhist vows, were they?
Not at all. They were a radical declaration of rupture from Hinduism and Brahminical culture.
What were the most critical vows?
They were unambiguous. They explicitly rejected the worship of Hindu deities like Brahma, Vishnu, and Mahesh. They specifically forbade believing that the Buddha was an avatar of Vishnu,
A crucial strategic move to prevent Hindu assimilation.
which was a common historical tactic to defang radical movements.
Yes, and they affirmed human equality, reason, and ethical conduct. By taking these vows, millions were formally breaking the chains of their previous identity.
Declaring that their self-image was now rooted in worth, choice, and freedom, rather than guilt or imposed karma.
This act was so profound, so deeply personal and political, that Ambedkar declared,
I have been reborn.
he had offered his people a new metaphysical identity rooted in dignity. The mass conversion was the definitive culmination of his life's mission, providing that spiritual liberation. It's poignant, as you mentioned, that Ambedkar died peacefully less than 2 months later, on December 6, 1956.
But the movement he started immediately exploded, ensuring his legacy wasn't just in law, but in the spiritual identity of millions.
It was a massive historical event. The Buddhist population in India, which was statistically negligible in 1950,
It skyrocketed to millions by 1960, primarily concentrated in Maharashtra, all converts to Navayana.
the most profound impact was the psychological revolution among these neo-Buddhists. For centuries, they were told they were polluted, karmically damned, and that their suffering was their cosmic fate.
Ambedkar shattered that belief.
And that new self-image rooted in choice, reason, and dignity led to tangible and immediate social change.
Absolutely. These communities, now armed with a powerful new identity, largely rejected jobs associated with pollution, such as scavenging or carrying night soil. They focused intensely on education, creating new generations of educated professionals.
They exchanged shame for dignity and fatalism for determination.
That's it exactly.
That determination and struggle are visible everywhere today, often in the form of his statues across India. It's fascinating that the blue suit, a symbol of colonial modernity, was repurposed by Ambedkar as a symbol of dignity.
The statues are truly a visual manifesto of his entire ideology. The blue suit is critical.
What did it communicate specifically?
It symbolizes modernity, competence, and intellectual capability. It was a rejection of the traditional attire associated with their lower status. It communicated that the oppressed had the ability to stand equal to any high-caste, professional, or Western-educated elite.
It's Sandberg. We are modern, educated, and capable.
Yes. The other two key symbols are equally powerful. The book in his hand.
Representing the Constitution, the use of knowledge and law as weapons.
And finally, the pointing finger, which is a clear, confident vision toward the future. It's not a finger pointed in accusation, but one pointed toward enlightenment, education, and collective action. It's directional. It demands forward movement.
The physical location of the revolution remains crucial as well. The Nagpur site, where the mass conversion took place, is now called Dikshubhumi.
The land of vows. It's an immense, vibrant place of annual pilgrimage. Dhammachakra Pravartin Din. Millions gather there every October 14th.
And it's important to note, they gather not to pray for divine intervention or blessings.
No, they gather to celebrate their self-liberation and their commitment to self-respect. It's a massive annual affirmation that they choose to live a life defined by ethical conduct and reason.
Finally, his enduring cultural legacy is encapsulated in that universal greeting.
Jai Bhim.
Victory to Bhim.
It's so much more than a greeting. It's a powerful cultural shorthand. When two people exchange that phrase, they immediately recognize their shared ideology, their shared history of struggle, and their mutual commitment to justice.
It acts as a recognition code.
One that transcends caste walls and reinforces the idea of a shared, chosen ethical community.
So, when we synthesize Dr. Ambedkar's life, we see this towering dual legacy. On one hand, he gave the oppressed legal armor through the Constitution, outlawing untouchability and securing political representation through reservation.
A magnificent feat of social engineering through law.
And just as crucially, he gave them a spiritual backbone through Navayana Buddhism.
He showed that true, lasting transformation requires not only changing the laws that govern external behavior, but spiritual self-determination to change the soul and remove the internal inherited shame.
He proved that law and religion must work together to achieve freedom.
He did. He demonstrated that profound liberation is not achieved by retreating from the world's suffering through personal renunciation.
But by confronting it head-on.
Wisdom, compassion, and courage. He confronted the world that told him he was polluted, armed only with books and reason.
His entire life is a challenge to us. It asks us to examine our own acceptance of injustice.
How often in our own lives or societies do we accept injustice as destiny simply because it has always been this way?
Ambedkar teaches us that the Dharma, the righteous path, is found wherever one refuses to accept injustice as destiny.
And chooses conduct and reason over birth and ritual.
We are reminded that the revolution begins with the courage to simply declare, as he did, I will not die a Hindu, or, more broadly, I will not die the person society told me I had to be.
The power of self-determination. That is the most powerful legacy of Babasaheb.